Welcome to From Betrayal to Breakthrough. I'm Dr. Debi Silber, and today's guest is Babs Walters. As a domestic violence and sexual abuse survivor, Babs has devoted much of her adult life to raising understanding and awareness of the long-term effects of generational trauma, breaking the chain. She's conducted trainings for the past 30 years on women's empowerment, sexual harassment, and discrimination, helping women speak up and out for themselves. Babs holds a master's in counseling human relations and has served on the Harassment Investigation Committee for 13 years. She serves as the designated interviewer for Brave Voices on the U.S. Library of Congress, where she recorded her own story. In her spare time, Babs teaches jazzercise, and her forthcoming memoir, Facing the Jaguar, a memoir of courage and confrontation, comes out soon. Today's episode comes with a heartfelt and important heads up. This conversation may be triggering for some listeners. We're diving into a topic that is often kept hidden: abuse, family secrets, and the lasting effects of generational trauma. My guest today is Babs Walters, an incredibly courageous woman, author and advocate who's turned her pain into purpose. Babs shares her personal story of surviving incest, living with the weight of silence, and how she ultimately broke free, not only for herself, but to help others feel less alone. This conversation is raw, it's real, and it's exactly the kind of truth that has the power to heal, even if it's hard to hear. So listen when you're ready, in a safe space and with compassion for wherever you are in your healing journey. Let's dive in. Okay, everybody, this may be a triggering conversation, so I'm saying it now so that you can watch, listen at your own pace, on your own schedule. I had Babs Walters with us today, and she's going to be talking about different forms of abuse and secret keeping and things like that, lots of generational trauma. So we're going to handle this as gently and lovingly as we can, but this is something that unfortunately impacts so many people. So we wanted to bring it to your awareness today. Welcome, Babs.
Thank you.
So let's just start with, just so we have a context here, to what extent you're comfortable, please share your story.
Well, I like to start my story in a way that is at least interesting. My parents met in a reform school for Jewish juvenile delinquents. Now, I don't think too many people can say that their parents met that way, but while they were housed on two separate campuses, the boys and girls separate, they somehow managed to become pregnant. And because they couldn't get married in New York without parental permission, they ran off to Baltimore, where I kind of spoiled their plan, Debbie. I came before I could seal the deal. So you're getting a picture. These are two troubled kids. They suddenly have a baby. What happens next is my father gets drafted. It's World War II. And he is trained to be a sniper. Unbeknownst to the people who chose that role for him, he was sent to the reform school for his anger management. And here they are giving him a gun and teaching him how to kill with one shot. My mother, on the other hand, was sent there because she was promiscuous, which I'm sure that nobody would be sent away to reform school today for that, but that was a different time. And when my father comes home from service, what does he find? My mother's replaced him. She's got another man in there with her and me. So this began the pattern of their relationship. They were married for 72 years, him getting violent and angry, her running away with other men. So I guess that's the foundation of how my sister and I were raised, what kind of childhood we had. And during the time that it was happening to me, I kind of didn't have a frame of reference for it. Incest was not something that people talked about. Mm-hmm. And one day when I was reading the encyclopedia, I found the word and the definition. And it was so isolating to me to hear that what was happening was that we were having sexual relations between two people too closely related by blood to marry. Nobody talked about the pain, the fear, the loneliness, the threats of my father to kill me. So I made a promise to myself that day that someday I would write a book and some other little girl would not feel all alone.
Mhm.
And right now, what I'm doing is, to your point about why we're talking today, is to get the word out to people about keeping family secrets, the damage of the secret, and how to heal from them.
So let's go back. Here you are going through something and not having a context for what the heck this is and what's going on. How, what meaning did you make of this? How did you interpret this?
Well, that's really the crux of my book. So I will give you like a little spoiler, but not too much. I disassociated. So it was the only way I could survive. I didn't know that that's what I was doing at the time. I thought I was having a dream or a nightmare, and that I was traveling away into another land. I loved to read. I think that was one of my saving graces as a child.
Mhm.
Because when you read a book, especially the books in the early 50s for girls, they were escape books. So, always happy endings. And I felt that if those heroines could survive whatever challenges were thrown their way, then I certainly could too.
Okay. So you dove into books, you disassociated, which is, I mean, this is typical. I mean, this is
Classic,
betrayal
right?
trauma right there. And what about like when you were in school and with friends and things like that? How was this? Did this affect your ability to trust, to feel safe, to make friends? How did it show up in your day-to-day relationships?
Well, actually, it's still showing up the same way. So I like my own company. I feel safest and happiest when I'm by myself,
Mhm.
which is kind of interesting because I was a corporate trainer. I'm a jazzercise instructor. I'm out in front of groups of people all the time. But as you know, Debbie, that's very different than a one-on-one
Mhm.
and sharing yourself intimately and being vulnerable.
So then, even as far as girlfriends and things like that, was there a hesitancy because you didn't feel safe, or you didn't feel like you could be open or authentic with your life?
Well, you hit the nail on the head, and you know what you're talking about. Um, I just felt all my life like I was different than everybody else,
Mhm.
that there was something wrong and bad about me because this was happening to me, that I didn't deserve for anybody to like me, and nobody would if they knew the truth. And so my self-talk, I think, hurt me as much as the abuse.
Right. Right. And and it always something starts mentally and emotionally, and then it always winds up being physical somehow as well. How did it show up for you physically? What were some physical symptoms, illnesses, conditions that may have emerged, if any?
When I was younger, you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. I stopped eating. It was the only area of my life I could control.
Yeah.
So at a very early age, I started smoking and drinking coffee. And that lasted, I would say, until my mid-30s.
Hmm.
I was basically anorexic.
Right. And then what happens in your mid 30s where you kind of realize that wasn't playing out well for you?
Well, I had my third child,
Okay.
and I made a decision that I needed to have a relationship with food in order to take care of my children. And I didn't know that food could taste so good. I mean, it was a surprise.
Right. And then what was because I imagine you're coming from something that just was so not aligned with who you were, with love and the love that you want to give to your own kids. Like I know with me personally, when there was things that I was raised with, and when I got pregnant with my first, I swore I would never say or do certain things. Was there something that happened with you where, it was like this decision of raising the kids differently so that you sort of break the chain? Anything like that?
Yes, actually, I probably went to somewhat of an extreme.
Hmm.
So I wanted my children to be very healthy. I had a lot of control over what they ate. I had a lot of control over what I got them involved in and the lessons I try to teach them. Um, I know that I told you that I wasn't going to talk about my kids, but funny, all three of my children blame me for something that they consider to be really bad. And I mean, I'm so thrilled that I go nowhere near what my parents did to me.
It,
I mean, I'm willing to accept those things. Like My older son became a doctor instead of a musician because I encouraged him that musicians don't make a lot of money,
Uh-huh.
and he's sorry now. He would like to be a musician. Um, my daughter became the stinky fish girl in school because she had learning problems, and I was controlling what she ate. So I poached fish for her and I gave her frookies. And it turns out that she found the most unpopular kid in school, ate all his yodels and ring-dings and snowballs, and traded her stinky fish. And my younger son says that I never let him have a headache with any Tylenol or any medication, that I tried to make him disappear it. And he says, what does an 8-year-old know about disappearing a headache? But I gave him a meditation. I mean, I was a crazy mom. But
But this is breaking the chain. You know, it's so funny because I'm thinking specifically, and I probably shared this story on another episode where I remember one of the things that happened with me was if I said or did anything that my family didn't like, I was stonewalled. I mean, no one spoke with me. And that was kind of emotional death. And I remember with my first, that was one of the things I said, I will never do that ever. I don't care what they say, what they do. I'm never doing that. And I remember one day specifically, one of my kids, I'm not going to call him out, but was incredibly, we'll call it vocal. And I just in the middle of a rant, I mean, this child was ranting, and I started laughing. I started laughing, and I started laughing because I realized, wow, there is nothing you can say or do that can make me not love you. And here I am tolerating this. And I was like, go me. And I just left the room. And that's how we break the chain, right? That's how we break the chain. So let's go back to what part does keeping family secrets play in healing from trauma? Let's talk about that.
well, it's for me, the realization started when I started taking a writing course for my memoir.
Mm-hmm.
And the coach that I had explained to me that if you're a famous person, everybody wants to read your story and they want to know how you did it. And while my story is remarkable, I'm not a famous person. So she said, you need to find the universal in your story because not everybody's going to have the same experience that you did. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to want to know about what you have to say, or they could learn from what you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked for what would be true for almost all people. And in the work that I've done, I've noticed that there are all kinds of family secrets. Uh, there could be an alcoholic parent. There could be a sibling that has a disability. There could be a suicide in the family that nobody talks about. There could be a bankruptcy. All the things that families feel that are shameful and don't want others to know and want to keep close in the family, they require that their all family members keep this secret when it shouldn't be our burden to start with. But
Exactly.
because we're good kids, and like I was the oldest, I was the good daughter. So I was the one who assumed the parental role. I was taught to keep that secret. And when I listened to people and the harm that keeping that secret has cost them, I looked into research about what would help people. And it's always the relief, the lessening of the burden always comes from communicating. Now, not everybody is ready, like I am, to stand up and face the world and tell them what happened. So I did a little bit more research and I put together a checklist of the stages of how to know if you're ready to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people may just need to write it on a piece of paper and tear it up and flush it down the toilet,
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else might need a therapist or a professional who can guide them and assist them in uncovering what they may have disassociated from. And some people, like me, last January, I recorded my story for the Library of Congress. And I've since become the designated interviewer for anybody who wants to join Brave Voices and tell their story and leave it to history.
Mm-hmm.
So in answer to your question, there's relief, there's healing, and there's sharing, community, validation, all of the things that make you feel so alone when you keep a secret.
And we heal in community. That's one of the reasons why within the PBT Institute, our community section is there. The research proved in healing from betrayal, we need community because we feel alone. We feel crazy. We feel like we're just swimming here on our own without any sign of the island nearby, and it's very helpful to have community. So let's go back to your sister. Was she impacted in the same way? Did she have a different healing path, or was she even impacted, or is that not something to talk about?
Well, no, I can speak about it. Because of my disassociation, when I left home, I thought everything that ever happened to me was completely over. Surprise, right, Debbie? And it never occurred to me, and a number of my therapists pointed it out, it never occurred to me that my father was going to have to go someplace, and now he went to my sister. My husband and I tried to adopt her. We went through a couple of jumped through hoops trying to get her out of the house. As it turned out, she copied my parents and became pregnant as a teenager and ran away to get married. So we didn't end up adopting her. But today, my sister is not happy about the book coming out. We've gone into mediation recently, and we have decided to stay in our own lanes.
Okay.
The book is off the topic. She's not interested in any of the community work that I'm doing or any of the education and prevention work that I'm doing. She has decided that she is completely healed.
Yeah. It's such a personal journey when someone, if and when they're ready, and clearly she's not, and you're sort of holding up a mirror to the experience, and she's just not ready to see it. I have seen so many times in the work that we do that doesn't mean that's the case forever. It could definitely mean, this is where it is now, and we respect the boundaries and the limits and all of that. And we just don't know. And it could very likely be that you may get a knock on your door one day and it's time. And then the healing begins, and it's a different timeline and roadmap for everybody. So let's talk about generational trauma. Why does this stuff get passed down? And it seems we see so often where it's almost easier to keep it going than break the chain.
Well, I ask myself the question why what it was about me that could break it and what it was about my parents that couldn't. Mm-hmm. So in my looking for universal truth in my story, I began checking out some of the things my parents told me about themselves to see. Now, we know that they went to a reform school. I didn't know the name of the school, but one of my therapists found it. And sure enough, we found my father was actually registered. I couldn't find my mother, but one of the things that my father had told my sister and I when we confronted him as adults was that when his mother had a miscarriage, his grandmother came to live with him. And there was an incident that happened while he was being taken care of by the grandmother that affected his life. Mm-hmm. And one of his cousins was still alive after my father passed, so I contacted her. And it turns out that the grandmother went to buy a chicken. In those days, you bought a chicken from a poulter. It hangs from a hook. They drain the blood. It's got the feathers on it. It's disgusting. I don't know why anybody would do that. But the way that you got rid of the feathers on the chicken, the quickest, is to singe it at a stove. They literally burned the feathers off the chicken.
Wow.
And while my father was 5 years old and standing next to his grandmother, she caught fire and burned to death in front of him.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Now, my father never told me this because my father didn't bother to think any further. But I looked up what would happen to a child at 5 witnessing an experience like this. Mm-hmm. And talk about disassociating. All of the therapists that answered that question said that he would have no empathy for another human being ever because he would never allow himself to feel again what it felt like at that formative developmental stage, right, to witness that. Yeah. And sure enough, my father had no guilt. Even when we confronted him, he told my sister and I we were his chattel, his goats and his cows. He could do whatever he wanted to us.
Wow.
So it's understandable why he couldn't change.
Yes. Yeah. Did you ever have a conversation with your mom?
Yeah. I did also, as a child, it was very hard for me to talk to her because she was a non-communicator. But as an adult, I invited her out to lunch and I asked her all of my questions.
Mm.
And basically, what she said to me is, at least you got away. She stayed married to him for 72 years. So I was so angry at her, Debbie. I so resented her all my life.
Sure. You feel like it's a betrayal. Here she was not protecting you.
Not protecting, pimping me. I had this dream as a child that my mother, my sister, and I were in front of a firing squad. And when the commander gave the order to fire, my mother bent down behind the two of us and pushed us forward. And I never really knew what that meant until I went into therapy years later. But I'm not angry at her anymore. And you know why? She did what she had to do to survive. And that tells you how lack of confidence and how weak and vulnerable she was to give her children up so that she could live.
Yeah. Yeah. And the gift is learning from it, growing from it, doing something good with it. The challenge becomes that's our role model and we do more of the same. And it sounds like you saw two profound examples of things to never do and not to move towards, not to replicate in your own life. So how did you heal from this?
Well, 45 years of therapy, but I call myself a self-help junkie.
Mm-hmm.
I took every webinar, every course, every book that I could find, a recording. I couldn't get enough of it. I was like a sponge. And I knew from my childhood and all the heroines. I mean, you could read Little Women, and even though there wasn't a pair of gloves to go with both of them, they would hold one glove in their hands and they had the other glove on. I always knew that there was going to be a way for me to be triumphant, and all I had to do was keep climbing that hill, go over the next one and the next one. And clearly, I had something my parents didn't have, and I can't say what that is. I might have been innate. It might have just been all the reading that I did at a young age. It could have been the way I translated what was happening. I didn't even know about reframing in those days.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And was there do you remember one book or course or modality that really kind of struck you like, wow, that really helped?
Well, I didn't feel like it helped, but it made a huge difference. And it was the S training. Did you
Talk
ever hear?
about that with everybody.
Yeah, the S training is the EST. It was Werner Erhard's training. He got a lot of flack afterwards because it was like a cult. But he said that there are only about 20 stories in life. Everybody falls into one of those categories. And the bottom line is you are responsible for what happens in your life, not what happened, what happens in your life.
Yeah.
I didn't like that message at all. Oh, I was pissy when I finished the training. I stayed in that room for 2 weekends and never went to the bathroom to find out that I was responsible. But you know what? Once I accepted that, Debbie, I don't always have it. I have to remind myself, but once I accepted it, I am responsible.
And isn't it so true? We're not, I mean, we can't help what happens to us, but it's what we do with it. And it sounds like you've done something really profound with what's happened to you. Babs, what do you want everybody to know as we wrap up?
Well, you said it before, so I'm just going to reiterate what you said. Healing is not a destination. It's a journey. And everybody's journey is different. Look at how long it took me to write that book that I promised myself when I was 11. So I think that what's most important in healing is to really take care of yourself, not to compare yourself with anybody. Take the steps that you need for your journey. And I always say it's never too late. I'm going to be 80 in June, and I have my book coming out, and I'm speaking to the world. So
Well, first of all, 80, and those of you who are just listening, I'm looking at Babs. That's a shocker. You're beautiful. I mean,
thank
you're
you.
beautiful, whatever age you are, but I had no idea you're going to be 80. That's just really amazing and just so inspirational. Again, what I love about your story and so many of our guests that we bring on the show is these things happen to us. They're so shockingly painful. We question our worth, our value, our all of it. But when we do something really good with something really painful, that's trauma well served. And Babs, you're going to help so many people with what you shared. Where do we go to learn more about you and what you do?
Well, www.babswalters.com, Walters.com for Instagram, and Babs Walters Author for Facebook.
That sounds great. Okay, everybody, you heard it here. Again, just a reminder that if you're going to listen or watch this again, bit of a trigger warning for those around you or yourself, just to take good care. Give yourself all kinds of love and compassion with this episode as you move through whatever it is you're moving through. Having said that, you can move through all of it. You're looking at someone who's done it, and just keep checking back, keep trusting yourself, one foot in front of the other, and you'll get there. Babs, thank you so much for your wisdom and all you shared with us today.
Debbie, thank you for creating a space for people to hear this.
Wow, what a powerful conversation. I want to thank Babs for her bravery, her honesty, and her commitment to breaking the silence so others can begin to heal. Stay in touch with her by going to babswalters.com, and we'll have all of her information in the show notes at thepbtinstitute.com/podcast. Here's my biggest takeaway. Healing from betrayal, abuse, or any kind of trauma is not a straight line. It's a journey, and you don't have to take it alone. If this episode stirred something in you, whether it brought up old wounds or sparked the beginning of something new, please take care of yourself. And of course, if you're looking for a supportive community to walk with you as you heal, visit us at thepbtinstitute.com. We're here for you. Thanks for listening. Can't wait to be with you next time, and here's to your breakthrough.